Discover the incredible journey of the samurai. 700 years of transformative valor revealed. Jake stared blankly at the faces before him, a sea of disinterest simmering in his classroom at Maplewood High. How could he possibly tug at their curiosity with stories of valor, when all they cared about were grades and college acceptance letters? He felt the weight of their skepticism, felt it lull his passion toward stasis. The colorful posters of influential figures above him did little to imbue his heart with hope. Instead, they mocked him reminders of the great figures while he stood as another faceless teacher who only renewed their apathy. Each worn-out shoe pressed against the grimy floor embodied the struggles looming above their heads. College costs were all they whispered about. Would they listen to him, really listen, when he yearned for historical discussions beyond the expected confines? As the bell rang, releasing his students, Jake remained, slumped in defeat. It was the last period of the day, and the adrenaline had all but worn off, leaving only moments of reflection. His dreams, once vibrant with the urge to instill knowledge, felt chained by prescribed lessons that sidelined the unsung heroes of humanity. He questioned whether he still had the strength to reclaim his own voice from a curriculum that prioritized popularity over authenticity. Weeks later, he found himself in the dusty attic of his late grandfather's home, searching for memories. He stumbled upon a box, its cardboard edges frayed and whispering secrets of time past. Inside lay an ancient samurai sword. The blade gleamed like memories waiting to be unearthed. This wasn't merely a weapon. It was a link to a heritage he barely understood, stories untold, battles fought, values honored. Just then, a surge of determination pierced through the fog of his self-doubt. Could this sword be the key to rediscovering his passion? Seeking clarity, Jake met with Mr. Takahashi, a local historian whose rich knowledge resonated like an echo of honor and sacrifice. Together they explored intertwining histories, sharing tales that agitated Jake's soul. What did valor truly mean in an age so quick to dismiss it? Each conversation breathed life into a forgotten spark, igniting a commitment within him to uncover the worth of those often overlooked. The conversations didn't just breathe new life into his teaching. They illuminated a path toward a meaningful existence. Just as hope burgeoned, the storm clouds rolled in. During a school board meeting, a member sneered at Jake's endeavors to share the history of his family and the samurai, branding it irrelevant. Laughter twisted around the room, pricking his heart with daggers of doubt and judgment. He felt stripped, emotionally raw, battling the fear that his passion would be smothered under the weight of societal expectation. The urge to defend his family's legacy battled against the risk of losing everything he had worked for. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jake stood at a precipice, the dual weight of honoring his family's legacy and retaining the respect of his profession tightening around him like a vice. What did it mean to be brave? To share these stories could redefine his purpose, but the feeling of impending loss hovered like fog in his mind. As he tightened his grip around the sword's hilt that now rested heavily in his bag, determination warred with fear. Would he be bold enough to confront the frailty of values in a world that often overlooked dignity? The decision pulsed in his veins as he faced the night that held no promises, leaving a churning uncertainty echoing in his heart. Could he balance the dreams of his lineage while honoring his path, without annihilating the man he had fought to become? The morning sun streamed through the classroom window, casting light on the worn desks and fading posters. With a deep breath, Jake arranged his lesson materials, determination taking root amid uncertainty. The lingering laughter from the previous school board meeting echoed in his mind, but the samurai sword, still nestled within his bag, spoke of courage and authenticity. Perhaps today would be different. As the students entered, he observed their muted expressions. He felt an urge to dive deeply into the stories emblazoned in his mind, yet hesitated. Would they care? The sheer thought of sharing the legacy of his ancestors alongside high school trivia was overwhelming. Yet, he was no longer merely a vessel for the standard curriculum. He was a storyteller, and he had tales to share. "Good morning, everyone," he began, trying to mask his anxiety with a smile. "Today, instead of learning about the usual textbook heroes, I want to introduce you to some lesser-known figures. We'll start our journey by discussing the samurai." A few heads perked up, but most remained indifferent. Jake pressed on, summoned by determination. He recounted the tale of a lone samurai lost, ostensibly defeated yet powered by a code that defined honor. As he spoke, he felt the warmth of vulnerability settle in his chest. The once daunting task transformed into a symphony of words, each bringing him closer to his students. Intrigued murmurs pierced the air as he unveiled the samurai's core values: loyalty, honor, and self-sacrifice. These men operated under a strict code called Bushido, he explained, noting the way certain students began to lean forward, propped upon their elbows. Each principle shaped their identity, guiding them through turmoil. He felt the energy shift, and his heart raced. Perhaps valor was more relevant than he had imagined, rooted not only in history but in the very fabric of their lives. As Jake journeyed deeper into the story, guiding them through the lessons of resilience and purpose, hope blossomed in the room. To his surprise, hands began to raise. Questions erupted, and students voiced their concerns and anxieties that mirrored the samurai's plight. The barrier of disinterest crumbled slowly, and he realized that they longed for stories of struggle, ambitions, and the challenges of navigating their futures. As the bell rang, a wave of exhilaration washed over him. This was only the beginning. He felt a renewed sense of responsibility to weave lessons of valor into their everyday lives. As he cleaned up and prepared for the next class, he couldn't shake the feeling of triumph. But beneath the surface, an acknowledgement loomed: acceptance in one class didn't erase the challenges awaiting him. That evening, sitting at his cluttered desk, Jake reflected on how to create a curriculum revolving around those values that had ignited his students' interest. But as he considered the next day, the nagging doubt flickered once more. The fear of backlash still loomed. Would he face further ridicule from colleagues who dismissed these historical lessons as irrelevant? Doubt gnawed at him as he turned the sword over in his hands, its weight grounding him amidst the chaos of uncertainty. Each strike of its blade echoed a call for valor. Could he face the metaphorical battles awaiting him as he dared to challenge the conventional? That night, a plan formed, a strategy to bridge history with personal struggle, but it required boldness he hadn't yet summoned. With the dawn of a new day, he would need to confront not just the skeptics in the school board but the deep-rooted fears within himself. Determined and unyielding, Jake knew he needed to stand firm. The time had come to face the true test of his resolve, balancing the legacy of the samurai with his quest to inspire. The question that remained gnawed at his core: would his journey toward authenticity illuminate their shared human experience, or would it incite even greater backlash? The next morning arrived with a sense of urgency, the sun rising higher over the school, illuminating the path ahead. Jake stood before the mirror, scrutinizing his face for traces of doubt. The sword, now resting on his desk, reflected an image of resolve. Today, he would weave the narrative of not just the samurai, but of his own journey, the personal battles that echoed within him as the bell rang. Signaling the start of the day, the classroom buzzed with the chatter of students re-entering the familiar space. Jake's heart thudded irregularly. He felt the familiar wave of pressure. Determined to counter it, he remembered the values of courage and honor he was eager to instill. He stepped into the room, his posture straightened as if he donned a warrior's armor. "Good morning again," he greeted, voice steadier. "Yesterday we met the samurai, but today we'll connect their stories to our own. I want to share more than just history. I want to share a part of me, and perhaps find pieces of you within it." Facial expressions shifted from tentative curiosity to surprise. A feeling of vulnerability washed over him, mingling with courage. Where was the line between teacher and student? He pondered how to expose himself without fear of judgment. He began speaking about his own struggles, the moments of self-doubt, the overwhelming sense of standing alone in the face of criticism from colleagues and even friends. "You see," he said, locking eyes with a student who had shared an anxious glance, "the samurai were not just skilled fighters. They were people who faced doubt just like we do. In their darkest moments, they stood firm in their beliefs, defending honor even when it meant losing everything." Several students leaned closer, intently engaged. A few nodded, faces revealing flickers of recognition. Jake was stepping into a realm he had seldom traversed, sharing instead of merely teaching. Every word held the weight of sincerity, an offering he knew was vital for both himself and his students. As questions began flowing, Jake felt liberated. They wanted to know more about the samurai's codes. They sought connections to modern life. Each inquiry became an invitation for Jake to further explore the depths he had feared to reveal. He shared how he discovered his passion for teaching, the subsequent criticism he endured, and the resilient spirit inspired by the heroic tales of his ancestors. The classroom transformed into a sanctuary where personal histories intertwined. Though the lesson flowed seamlessly, a shadow lurked at the corners of Jake's mind. Would his colleagues truly understand his choice to blend personal stories with history? The impending school board meeting loomed. Doubts seeped in as he wondered if they would dismiss his innovative approach as unprofessional. Yet as he wrapped up the lesson, gratitude filled the air. Students expressed their thoughts, sharing their struggles and connecting them to the values of loyalty and honor. Jake realized they craved authenticity as much as he did. Every narrative he shared unlocked pieces of their souls, creating a bond that made them more than just a classroom of students. They were a collective of emerging warriors. As he cleaned the desk, one student lingered behind, a shy girl with inquisitive eyes. "Mr. Jake, how do you keep trying when it's hard?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her question pierced through his guarded heart. It was easy to preach resilience, but he had often faltered in its practice. Yet, he saw in her a reflection of every challenge he had faced. "I remind myself," he replied slowly, "that even the strongest warriors doubt. What matters is how we choose to rise up after." The sincerity in his tone reflected his ongoing struggle, a battle he would continue each day. As the bell tolled, signaling the end of class, Jake felt a sense of accomplishment that merged with trepidation. He had stepped outside of his comfort zone, yet the real test awaited him. The school board meeting was not just a hurdle. It was a moment that could define his journey. Taking a sudden deep breath, Jake clenched the sword tightly in his hand. Would the courage to stand before the board and share his vision lead to triumph? Or would it bring an avalanche of disapproval? With newfound determination driving his steps, he walked down the hall, heart pounding, ready to confront a reality that demanded not just bravery, but bold authenticity. As Jake approached the meeting room, the familiar knots of anxiety twisted tighter in his stomach. Each step resonated with heavy anticipation. He was not just walking to present a lesson. He was about to unveil a piece of his essence, tinted with the art of storytelling and the light of vulnerability. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting a harsh glare on the polished table, around which the school board members sat, faces inscrutable. Jake took a deep breath, his fingers brushing against the hilt of the sword, tucked thoughtfully beneath his jacket. It felt like the reassuring weight of his ancestors' legacy, one that echoed tales of honor and relentless perseverance. "Are you ready?" A voice beside him broke through the mounting silence. It was Maya, his supportive colleague, her presence warm and reassuring against the chill of judgment he anticipated. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, and stepped forward. As he opened the door, a wave of sound spilled out, the rustling of papers, whispered exchanges, and the solemn air of scrutiny instantly struck him. This was not merely a room. It was a crucible poised to test his passion against the standards of tradition. With a polite smile, he introduced himself. "Thank you for being here. I'm excited to discuss how integrating personal narrative can transform our teaching curricula." He noticed the board members exchange glances, skepticism shadowing their expressions. Jake continued, recalling the engagement he had witnessed in his classroom. He shared anecdotes about his students, weaving in their stories of struggles and triumphs as they related to the samurai ethos. His voice gained momentum, imbued with the sincerity he had kindled just hours before. By embracing our stories, we allow students to reflect on their own challenges. Just as the samurai faced their hardships, our students battle their own fears. When I shared my experiences, it resonated deeply with them. The words flowed, unlocking his passion, yet a flicker of doubt clawed at him. Would they see the merit in this frame of teaching? He paused for a moment, reading the faces around the table. The chairwoman, Ms. Isaac, leaned forward, interest piqued but skepticism still evident. Jake, while I understand the value of personal experiences, do you think it detracts from the subject matter? History is rigid, I senti it? Her question felt like an arrow aimed straight at the heart of his vision. He hesitated, unprepared for such a direct challenge. Yet, beneath that hesitation grew a sense of defiance. History is more than dates and events. It's the human experience. The samurai's narrative resonates because it encapsulates growth through adversity, a lesson as relevant today as it was then. Senti that what we aim to teach? The room fell silent, and he could feel the tension thrumming through the air. It was a defining moment, his ideology against their tradition. Every instinct told him to back off, to mold his thoughts to fit a more palatable narrative. But then he remembered the shy girl's question, the fierce connection he had formed with his students. Could he compromise that sincerity for acceptance? No. Teaching should invite students in, not alienate them, he declared, conviction fortifying his stance. Their engagement stems from recognizing their own struggles mirrored in the past. As he spoke, he sensed the shift. The board members leaned in slightly, curiosity sparking in their expressions. Jake's heart quickened. Could he actually turn their budding skepticism into support? Yet, as the questions began to flow, one was sharper than the rest. Jake, some consider your method unprofessional. How do you defend that? What if the students misinterpret those stories? The challenge was bold, and for a heartbeat, self-doubt clawed its way back. What if he had strayed too far from the curriculum? What if he was wrong? I embrace that risk because real learning disrupts the norm. If we allow fear of misinterpretation to hold us back, we constrain growth, Jake countered. His voice steady but underlying vulnerability made its presence known. There it was, the fine line he walked between authenticity and criticism. The atmosphere thickened as the board members exchanged contemplative glances. It was unclear whether they were intrigued or ready to dismiss his approach entirely. And as the meeting rolled on, Jake recognized how he was balancing on a precipice, one that could either ascend him into a new realm of teaching or plunge him into turmoil. He was challenged not only to defend his vision but to confront his own fears of inadequacy. As the session drew to a close, the chairwoman thanked him for his insights, leaving Jake with a sense of anticipation mingling with lingering anxiety. Would he be an educator unbound? Or was he just on the cusp of facing their disapproval? The final moments hung heavy with uncertainty. All he could do was hope. Walking out, he felt the pressure easing slightly, both relieved and anxious about what lay ahead. Even as he pulled open the door after the meeting, he knew this was merely the beginning. Little did he realize that the real battle with his own insecurities was yet to unfold, an inevitable confrontation that would challenge not just his path as an educator, but also the very essence of his identity. And the bittersweet aftermath. Another question loomed larger in his mind. What was the ultimate lesson he would learn about himself? The meeting weighed heavily on Jake as he walked down the corridor, an internal storm brewing within him. Had he gone too far in his defense of personal narrative? A part of him basked in the fire of rebellion, emboldened by his own convictions. But another part, the more cautious side, recoiled in dread over how the board would ultimately judge his approach. Finding solace in the empty teacher's lounge, he poured himself a cup of coffee, its warmth barely registering against the cold uncertainties swirling in his mind. He leaned against the counter, gazing out the window as muted gray clouds hung low. Everything felt like it was edging toward a breaking point, a tipping scale where his passion for teaching teetered perilously close to the expectations of his superiors. Maya entered the room, her brows furrowed with concern. "Hey, you okay?" Jake turned to her, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah, just processing." Your presentation was compelling. You stuck to your guns, she encouraged, although he could see the hint of trepidation in her expression. Or I risked losing credibility, he replied, the weight of his vulnerability pressing against his chest. Credibility? Jake. No one builds a legacy by playing it safe, especially in education, Maya said, her spirited conviction igniting a flicker of hope within him. He nodded but couldn't shake the gnawing doubt, the thought that he might just be paving a road leading nowhere. The freedom he craved was dampened by the looming reality of compliance. What if they see me as unprofessional? What if this costs me my job? Every innovator faces pushback. Just remember why you're doing this, she said, her voice steady. Your students are what matter most. They're responding to your stories. Maya's words struck a chord, a reminder that his calling lay beyond the walls of the boardroom. He could almost feel the faces of his students bright, eager, fighting against life's obstacles. He took a deep breath, pulling himself away from the swirling darkness as he grasped the essence of what he believed in. But that realization unleashed a new torrent of frustration. He needed to find a way to convince the board that his methods were not just acceptable but essential. The thought of becoming an antihero in their eyes filled him with dread. Would he need to embrace conflict as a necessary component of his evolution as an educator? The next day, bolstered by Maya's support, Jake propelled himself back into the lioness den. He found himself at the classroom door, once again steeling himself for battle, not just for acceptance but to gain the insights he needed. That he shifted his focus onto his students. Each face reflected a story, each one a tangible reminder that education transcended mere facts. As he clung to that truth, he absorbed their energy, their vitality invigorating his resolve. Through class discussions, he encouraged them to weave their narratives into historical context. He saw the hesitant smiles as well as the signs of transformation igniting in their eyes. Let us explore your stories, he said one day, his voice lifting as belief colored his words. How does your personal journey echo those of the great figures in history? He felt the walls of self-doubt slowly start breaking down as his students began to share. As their tales unfolded, so too did Jake's confidence in his vision. Their vulnerability mirrored his own, a collective embrace of courage they all shared. However, just as he began to feel a shift toward promise, the specter of the school board loomed once more. An email landed in his inbox, a scheduled follow-up meeting to discuss his presentation. Discomfort boiled back to the surface. Had they considered his thoughts? Were they simply preparing him for more dissent? He clenched the phone tightly, mind racing. The board's stringent expectations pulsed through his psyche like a metronome of dread. The door swung open as Maya entered, interrupting his spiraling thoughts. You ready? She asked, her aura radiating support. Ready? I'm terrified, he confessed, letting go of his defenses. Then, let us embrace that fear. You've connected with your students and that's what matters. Let us show them the power of those stories. Let them see the heart of your vision. With her encouragement tightening around him like a well-fitted armor, a decision formed within Jake. He would not shy away from this confrontation. Instead, he would meet it head-on. The time had come for a daring leap toward clarity, a chance to confront the board, not with trepidation, but with the belief in the transformative strength of storytelling. He could evolve past the fears of inadequacy. That door was opening again. But what would emerge on the other side awaited revelation. Would he stand firm in his truth or falter as he faced the ultimate scrutiny? As he gripped the doorknob, the heartbeat of anticipation quickened, igniting both anxiety and determination. The moment of truth was upon him. Jake straightened his posture as he stepped into the conference room, seeking an anchor against the encroaching tide of uncertainty. The pristine white walls were lined with portraits of previous principals, silent witnesses to countless academic struggles looming with their disapproving gazes. The board members were already seated, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. He felt their eyes drilling into him as he sat down, the chair creaking ominously beneath the weight of his apprehension. Jake's heart raced, the echoes of Maya's encouragement mingling with the nagging doubts that crept back like shadows. Thank you for joining us, Jake, said the chairwoman, her tone cordial yet edged with professionalism. We reviewed your presentation on personal narrative in the classroom and would like to discuss your methodology further. Jake inhaled deeply, grounding himself in the moment. I appreciate the opportunity to present my views. His voice wavered, but steadied as he recalled the stories of his students' exemplars of resilience and growth. The chairwoman's eyes narrowed slightly. While we understand your intentions, some board members feel that personal stories might detract from standardized educational goals. How do you respond to that? The question hung in the air, oppressive, forcing Jake to confront his deepest fears. With all due respect, I believe that personal narratives enrich education rather than detract from it. Storytelling fosters deeper engagement with the material. It instills critical thinking, allowing students to draw parallels between their lives and historical contexts. His voice grew stronger as he defended his philosophy. That sounds idealistic, another board member interjected, skeptical. How do you measure its effectiveness? Jake felt the heat of indignation flare within him, an impulse to retreat and shield himself against their scrutiny tugging at him. But he pushed it aside, channeling that energy into a clear vision. The measure is in the engagement. Students who see their stories reflected in the curriculum exhibit higher retention of knowledge. They are not just passive recipients of facts, they become active participants in their learning. Something flickered in the eyes of the board members, but doubt still lingered. Their expressions reflected a calculation that weighed conformity against innovation. A tension Jake could feel tightening in the space between them. I want to share an example, he continued, leaning forward. Last week, a student wrote about her struggle with immigration and related it to the challenges faced by immigrants in American history. It not only sparked a vibrant discussion but deepened empathy in her peers. They connected this isn't just academic theory, it's real-life impact. The silence that followed was electric, filled with the tension of doubt opposing an emerging understanding. Jake could feel the dynamics shifting, but it was fragile. Just then, the chairwoman cleared her throat, breaking the suspense. We appreciate your enthusiasm, but what's your plan moving forward? How can you ensure that this approach aligns with our educational standards? Jake's mind raced, seeking clarity in the storm of questions. If granted the chance, I'd like to pilot a curriculum that integrates personal narratives into existing frameworks demonstrating measurable outcomes. We can assess students' engagement through feedback and performance metrics while still adhering to state standards. A murmur of impressed surprise rippled through the board. He was taking ownership of the conversation, opening doors that had momentarily felt locked. Yet the specter of potential backlash still loomed, lurking at the edges of his resolve. We need thorough data analysis and periodic reviews, the chairwoman responded thoughtfully. If your pilot program demonstrates effective results, perhaps we can discuss broader implementation. Jake felt a surge of relief but paired with a sense of urgency. The conversation was beginning to shift, and he couldn't afford to hesitate now. In that case, I'm prepared to present to teachers and gather their input. Collaboration will be essential for success, and feedback from all levels can shape the project into something remarkably impactful. The board members exchanged glances, their expressions softening yet retaining caution. This was his moment, a leap toward redefining the educational landscape he inhabited. As the meeting concluded, Jake stepped out of the room, pulse racing. He had set the wheels of change in motion, but internal doubts returned, whispering that the battle was far from over. He felt empowered, but the uncertainty of execution weighed heavily. His heart pounded as he sensed two opposing forces colliding within him: hope for something better and the terror of potential failure. The next steps would not be easy. There would be resistance, metrics to prove, and allies to win over. Suddenly, his phone buzzed with a new email notification. Opening it, he froze an invitation to present his narrative framework at an upcoming regional educators conference. Eyes wide, he began to wonder. Was he ready to share his vision on a larger stage, or would fear hold him back once again? Jake stared at the glowing screen, his pulse quickening as a cascade of emotions surged within him. Excitement, anxiety, and an undercurrent of self-doubt. An invitation to present at the regional conference was both an incredible opportunity and an overwhelming responsibility. The thought of addressing a larger audience sent his mind racing. Would they resonate with his vision, or would he find himself grappling with skepticism again? He could already envision the sea of faces, some eagerly nodding in understanding while others wore masks of incredulity. Would he falter under their scrutiny? The fear whispered again, reminding him of past failures. Shapes of his students floated through his mind, those eager young lives who had taught him as much as he ever taught them. If he could engage them, perhaps he could connect with fellow educators. Jake decided to act rather than dwell in fear. His initial instinct was to prepare thoroughly, to rehearse until his delivery was impeccable. He opened a new document and began to outline his speech. The core of his message crystallized. Personal narratives empowered students. Each point he formalized began to feel like a lifeline, anchoring him in conviction. As hours of sifting through thoughts and data flew by, Jake reached out to Maya. He knew she would believe in him even when he wavered. "I could really use your insight on this," he texted her. Seconds later, her response pinged back. "Be bold, Jake. Remember, this is about inspiring others. Let us brainstorm." Maya met him the following afternoon at a local cafe, the rich aroma of coffee enveloping them in a cocoon of pleasant distraction. She listened intently as he shared his ideas, and together, they worked through his points, adjusting and refining them until they had crafted a compelling narrative aimed at capturing attention. "We need to lead with a story that opens minds," Maya suggested, passion igniting in her eyes. "Your experience with the immigration essay is a perfect entry. Start there." Jake nodded. He hadn't considered opening with a tangible example of success. That story was not just an anecdote, it was evidence of the connection he sought to cultivate in classrooms everywhere. He jotted down notes as she spoke, and with each suggestion, he felt a flicker of confidence push back at the doubt. As they wrapped up, Maya leaned closer. "Jake, you have something valuable to offer, but it's not going to be easy. Expect pushback, and be ready to explain your methods thoroughly. Not everyone will be receptive." The words planted seeds of reality, yet they also fortified his resolve. He realized that presenting his framework would require more than just passion. He needed to be strategic, ready to defend his perspective against the very same doubts he had battled in the boardroom. Once home, Jake sat at his desk, reviewing the goals he had outlined for his pilot program. Each point laid bare a path forward, yet shadows lingered around the possibilities of failure. Could he measure transformation in engagement? Would standardized tests truly reflect the impact of personal narrative integration? That night, he couldn't shake the looming sense of anticipation mixed with fear. The conference was fast approaching, and anxiety mounted as he rehearsed in front of the mirror, feeling the weight of expectations cradle his shoulders like a heavy coat. Determination flickered brighter with each repetition. He would focus on their engagement and connection to the material. Those were irrefutable aspects of learning, after all. But as he drifted into a restless sleep, his mind was consumed with what lay ahead. Jake woke suddenly at dawn, sweat trickling down his brow, a new realization dawning upon him. Every educator in that room was human, just like him. They would each carry their own fears and aspirations. Was he ready to share not just a framework, but a piece of himself? It was time to embrace vulnerability rather than shy away from it. Taking a deep breath, he resolved to allow his personal narrative to shine brightly within his professional presentation. He opened his eyes, a sense of clarity washing over him. He no longer questioned whether he could deliver. Instead, he asked, "What will it mean to them?" Jake reached for his notebook once more, ready to pen the powerful opening he had envisioned. The conference was a stage, but he realized now it also represented a threshold, his moment to step into a new realm of influence and authenticity. But first, he had to face the fiercest adversary, himself. Would the story he shared resonate deeply enough to ignite transformation, or might it falter in light of his lingering doubts? The morning light filtered through the curtains as Jake sat at his desk, tension coiling within his chest. He had convinced himself that authenticity was the key, yet the thought of unveiling his vulnerabilities still sparked anxiety. He could choose to present a polished version of himself, safe, rehearsed, and devoid of personal truths. But would that really inspire anyone? He tapped the pen against his notebook, contemplating what lay in the intersection between his experiences and the expectations of a room full of educators. He envisioned their faces again, the skeptics and the supporters, and grappled with the possibility that his journey could resonate if presented with sincerity. Jake spent the next hour refining his opening, breathing life into what had previously felt like a job. He needed to convey what personal narratives meant to him and articulate why they mattered, not just as concepts but as transformative tools capable of altering perspectives. The more he wrote, the clearer his message became. With every stroke of his pen, his past experiences reshaped into stepping stones. Maybe he thought, if I can connect my story to their experiences, it will allow us to share in the struggle of teaching. Yet even as he acknowledged this, he couldn't escape the underlying fear of inadequacy, a relentless shadow that loomed just outside his consciousness, ready to leap at the slightest crack. With each subsequent draft, Jake grew more resolute. His focus shifted from merely presenting information to cultivating a communal understanding. Sharing not only would lift the weight of expectation off his shoulders, but might also illuminate paths for others who battled similar demons. There was potential for his narrative to inspire change, not just for his students but for his peers as well. Jake interspersed data with anecdotes from his classroom, depicting honesty as a currency in education that could catalyze student engagement. He knew data could only illustrate part of the story, so he emphasized his struggles as a teacher, moments of both failure and triumph. He would confront the lingering doubt head-on, transforming it into a narrative of resilience. What if my struggles can provide hope? He pondered, sensing a palpable shift in how he approached the task. The previous evening's concerns began to lose their grip. Jake realized fear was merely a part of the human experience, something he shared with every formidable educator out there. He could leverage his personal story not only to anchor his message but also to build a bridge of understanding with the audience, letting them glimpse the humanity behind the role they played. As he prepared for his presentation, he recalled Maya's warning about pushback. Her words resonated deeply. Be ready to explain your methods. Each objection could feel daunting, yet he recognized it was an opportunity to deepen the conversation. Armed with the authenticity of his experience, he felt ready to engage in dialogue rather than monologue. By the time he finished his draft, Jake reflected on the evolution of his mindset and heart. This journey toward vulnerability was forcing him to recognize latent reservoirs of strength he hadn't acknowledged before. He had transitioned from fear of judgment to a commitment to share in the pursuit of deeper understanding. Finally, he closed the notebook and stared intently at the presentation slides on his screen. They represented more than just bullet points, they embodied the connections he wanted to create. With mere days left until he stepped onto that stage, he made a choice. He wouldn't just be a speaker. He would be an advocate, a storyteller fulfilling the rare power that comes from being truthful. Yet, as he took a deep breath, a question tugged at his consciousness: had he truly prepared enough? Could raw honesty stand firm against a wave of skepticism? The thrill mingled with fear set his heart racing once again, a bittersweet reminder of the intensity of what lay ahead. The time had come to face not just the audience, but also his own apprehensions. Would sharing these truths and insights cultivate the change he envisioned, or would the weight of doubt threaten to bring him crashing down? The room was abuzz with chatter as Jake entered, his heart a war drum echoing through the tension of anticipation. He glanced at the time on his phone and felt a swell of anxiety return. A subtle blend of excitement and dread threatened to overwhelm him as colleagues gathered in clusters, steeped in their discussions about the day's agenda. Each voice felt like a reminder of the responsibility that lay before him as he made his way towards the podium. The clatter of laughter faded into a murmur, the crowd's energy shifting like the tide turning from quiet to storm. Jake inhaled slowly, anchoring himself in the moment. This was no longer merely an assignment. This was an opportunity to redefine his path, both personally and professionally. He set his materials down, feeling the weight of his story nestled within the pages. His resolve reignited. He was not simply a speaker but a vessel for change, carrying his truths illuminated by experience. Jake took a moment to observe the audience. Was that skepticism in some eyes? Others appeared genuinely curious. He recognized the mix of emotions he had once navigated within himself: doubt, hope, and a desire for connection. Each face represented a potential ally or adversary in this uncharted territory. This realization brought him to a startling understanding. A bond existed between them, rooted in shared challenges and aspirations. The presentation began, and with every spoken word, Jake felt traces of his anxiety ebb away as he transformed shared struggles into a common narrative. Teaching, he said, is an act where vulnerability can be as crucial as expertise. As he revisited moments of confusion in his teaching journey, he felt the audience inch closer, intrigued, leaning into his revelations. When he recounted a lesson gone awry, laughter erupted, breaking the tension that had initially encased him. Acknowledging his battlefield of emotions, he unfolded his reflection on how setbacks had clawed at his belief in himself, but had also imprinted lessons upon his heart. With each slide, he painted the nuances of resilience, crafting a tapestry woven with threads of hope. These were not just stories of failure. They were springboards into growth, designed to resonate. Yet as the applause rang in his ears, an unsettling thought clawed at him: was authenticity truly enough to bridge the gap with skeptics? Had he transformed his own fears into empowering narratives convincingly? The conversation had swelled around his stories, but the lingering feel of doubt persisted at the back of his mind. That as Jake stepped down, the audience's responses varied. The curious, who had listened attentively, approached him with questions that sparked a deeper dialogue. They expressed genuine resonance with his tales of overcoming frustration and cultivating a nurturing environment for their students. But then his eyes caught a figure from the back, one of the strongest critics in the room, arms crossed defiantly. "I want to know," the critic said, his voice steady but challenging, "how do you respond when those narratives don't yield results?" The room fell into a hushed anticipation, tension rising like steam. The moment hung thick in the air, raw and uncertain, as Jake felt the spotlight shift onto this confrontation. In this singular moment, something clicked within him. Here was the opportunity to delve deeper into the intersection between vulnerability and effective practice. Could he defend the value of his truths in the face of challenge? Feeling a shift, he drew a deep breath. It was time for a new chapter, not just in this presentation, but in his own journey, a chance to articulate how struggles, when embraced, could illuminate pathways for others. "Why doesn't our authenticity guarantee results?" he asked, the question bouncing back from the walls of the room. As the atmosphere thickened with anticipation, Jake pondered if he had finally tapped into something deeper, a raw, unfiltered honesty that challenged the expectations of a traditional educator. Would he step forward into that discomfort and confront it head-on, or would he retreat back into the safer version of himself? As Jake stood at the crossroads of his journey, a profound realization began to anchor him. The once daunting specter of vulnerability transformed into an empowering ally, guiding him through the chaotic landscape of expectations and doubt. In the moments following his presentation at the conference, he found himself amid a whirlwind of conversations that challenged his resolve. But amidst the skepticism, the warmth of understanding glimmered. The critic's question hung at the forefront of Jake's mind, merging with the myriad responses from those who resonated with his truths. He could feel the tug of uncertainty gnawing at him, yet instead of recoiling, he chose to embrace it. Our authenticity doesn't guarantee results because the journey of learning is not linear. Just like the samurai faced defeat only to rise again, we must allow room for setbacks. It is through those struggles that we cultivate resilience both within ourselves and our students. His voice, steady and clear, articulated a burgeoning conviction that resonated with many in the audience. The more he spoke, the more he fortified his vision. Authenticity was not merely a philosophy but an integral part of effective teaching. He could sense the tension in the room beginning to shift, lighting a path for dialogue that would not only challenge expectations but broaden understanding. In the coming weeks, he would harness this momentum into actionable plans for his classroom and beyond. Meetings with colleagues transformed from skeptical inquiries into collaborative brainstorms, each session pulsating with fresh ideas and innovative strategies that fueled the integration of personal narratives into the curriculum. Jake found himself not just advocating but collaborating in crafting a more dynamic narrative approach. This transformation was not merely professional but deeply personal. He learned to advocate for his ideas firmly and with unwavering confidence. Jake's journey culminated in his classroom, the space he cherished most. Armed with the support he had nurtured, he restructured lessons, weaving personal anecdotes with historical narratives. The samurai tales were no longer distant stories of valor, but became tangible lessons on navigating life's complexities. Engagement burgeoned as students discovered their own struggles reflected in the narratives shared, and Jake reveled in the engagement blossoming before him. The students began to take ownership of their learning, not just seeing the historical figures as distant echoes of valor, but as mirrors to their own lives. One student boldly presented her interpretation of Bushido, echoing themes of loyalty she felt deeply in their current social landscape. Another student, inspired by his personal struggles, connected his resilience to the samurai's steadfastness against adversity. As the academic year rolled on, something remarkable happened. Jake received an invitation to return to the conference not merely as a participant this time, but as a speaker again, this time to share the results of implementing personal narrative pedagogy in the classroom. The acknowledgement validated not just his methods but the collective journey he had undertaken with his students. Jake's heart swelled with pride. This was the transformation he had longed to achieve, a recognition not just of his ideas, but of the stories that threaded through each student's experience. In that moment, he felt solid confidence. He was no longer a faceless educator in a sea of disinterest. He had evolved into a storyteller, a guide, and an advocate for authenticity, and his role now resonated loudly beyond the walls of his classroom as he took the stage that day. Standing before an audience of educators, he understood the weight of his journey, a transformation from skepticism to profound belief in the power of vulnerability and storytelling. He shared not only his methods but the stories that fueled them. Each word carried the weight of realization that conquering self-doubt had anchored him in purpose. And as he concluded his presentation, he was met with sustained applause, signifying not just approval but a resonation with the shared commitment to heal and inspire through teaching. "We are all journeys of stories waiting to be told," he declared, feeling the embrace of newfound confidence wrapping around him. Leaving the stage, Jake walked into the crowd with a smile. He had not only achieved professional growth, but had proven to himself that he could stand vulnerable, owning both his past and present. This was his triumph, a symbol of the legacy he now carried forward, inspired by the spirit of the samurai, with stories once silenced now echoing loud and clear. Now, for those of you who resonate with tales of personal overcoming, this is the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help these important stories reach those who need them. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible conclusion. Your input matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this affirmation of courage. Don't wait even one more second to take part in this journey.